Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Jim Mason, and I'm the program director of the Small Business Hub at Wright Brothers Institute. If anybody here is over here, Wright Institute, who is not?
Wow, that's pretty.
We have one that's not familiar.
Yeah, that's okay. We have 3 facilities. Our big thing is collaboration, obviously. This is one of the collaboration facilities, obviously. And then we have it on Springfield Street, across from the Air Force Museum. Then we have a prototype facility over on Janney Road, just off the State Avenue. We've been in business for 21 years. AFRL is our major customer, but we do also do work across the Air Force and other. I just want to do a special shout out to today. We're kind of got a little bit of a sponsorship thing going on here with the Women in Defense. Rachel Mackey, she's the outgoing president, right? Right. And Joni Taylor is going to be the new one. So we're going to do little introductions to their the induction ceremony of the new chapter officers. Okay, so that's going to be first after I'm done here with my maintenance. Also want to welcome Ms. Bullock here today. She's the director of contracting in AFFCPK. Jeff Malott, good buddy of mine, helping out with a lot of colliders. He is the director of the AFMC Small Business Office. So, and also want to have problems with people's phones not being silent. So make sure your phone is silenced because see all these microphones that are hanging down, so they're all live. So just want to warn you, if you're in the back, if you're in the back, just have a little conversation. You can't have a conversation because everybody that's online is going to hear you. Okay. So and that takes away obviously from the speakers being able to for us to hear them online too. Okay. I just want to let everybody know as far as the presenters speak up clear and everything, because you have to speak a little loud for the drop mics. Okay. The one thing I hate talking about every collider is parking. Everybody good with their parking spot? Anybody have any like issues or wondering where they parked? Just don't park right behind us here, the 2 rows. Okay, because they will tow you. So what is everybody? Do we have Wi-Fi? Just that little slip of paper on the table. We've been having some problems though with the coax Wi-Fi today. If you are not able to connect, that's the one that I know is working right now. Restrooms, I'm sure most of you have found them already. They're on that side hallway over there. We're gonna have open break policies, so if you have to use the restroom, go ahead and just get up and go. Because we have a lot of information to get here today. We do have a snack bar. It's pay as you go. There's pop soda, but there's also free water right here, and Mary put some wonderful snacks over there if there's still any left. One good thing today, there are no slides today. That's always my big deal. I always get 50 people asking for slides after the thing, but we will be recording, obviously recording of that. I'll be sending that out to everyone that's registered in case you don't watch it again. And then lastly, we're going to do the networking thing after the event also at the Dayton Beer Company. It's optional. It's Friday night. Good time to have a beer after work. So, but I just want to let you know that it's just right straight across the parking lot. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Rachel to start with the minute defense part of it. Yeah, later.
Thank you.
Welcome.
We love doing co-colliders in the gym. It's awesome to work with. The space is great, so we'll do more of these with Jim as usual. But good afternoon and happy Friday. I'm Rachel Mackey. I am the outgoing president of Women in Defense for the Greater Ohio Valley chapter. This is our 11th annual meeting. And today we're going to be doing the induction of new officers effective October 1st. So thank you guys for being here for the fighter and for enjoying our induction as well. I want to give a special shout out to this little segment. I know we've got other sponsors for the whole fighter, which I appreciate. We've got a small little segment here that we've got an event sponsor with Ms. Ann Hurley. She's the CEO of LDSS Corporation, and she has some gift cards at the very end. So if you guys will be getting those raffle tickets, those are for gift cards from LDSS Corporation. This was my second year serving the chapter as the president, and I just want to give a really quick and big thank you to all of the board members who made my job a lot easier this year. I'm Rachel Mackey, the president. Lisa Coker was our vice president. Carolyn Stephanie was the treasurer. Joni Ehlers, secretary. Shanna Staton, director of programs. Pam Sutton, director of membership. Elena Ober, director of sponsorships. Robin De La Vega, director of scholarships. Mandy Thompson, director of mentoring. And Jenny Hempstead, director of communications. So I just want to give a big thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Miss Ann Hurley. She's going to be doing the induction for officers for this year.
Good afternoon, everyone. How about a shout out to Rachel, who not only but well, during her tenure as president gave birth. Thank you, Rachel. So welcome to our induction ceremony. This is an annual event. We're super grateful to be able to merge it with the Collider today, and grateful for all of you who are attending. So Women in Defense began back in the fall of 1979, and today has over 20 chapters across the nation. The Greater Ohio Valley chapter, so our chapter, is one of them, and we have over 120 members. So we are celebrating our 11th year as a chapter, and we're taking time today to install our new chapter officers and directors. So those of you who are coming in to be installed, do you mind coming forward? So you may notice Rachel is coming forward as the outgoing president. She's going to be wearing a new hat in the next year. So based on the WID operating procedures, our membership voted on 4 officer positions: president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And the incoming president, Joni, has made direct appointments to 5 director positions based on the advice and input from the sitting board members and our senior advisors. All the officers and directors will take the oath and be installed today for their 2023-2024 positions. And so we begin. Women in Defense, a national security organization, is a professional organization for individuals whose work is related to the United States defense and national security efforts. Our mission is to cultivate and support the advancement and recognition of women leaders in all aspects of national security. WID provides its members a formal environment for professional growth through networking, education, and career development. A team of dedicated women volunteered and were recently elected or appointed to lead our chapter as board members over this next year. The board's 4 elected officers and 5 directors who are being appointed by our new chapter president today are Joni Ehlers, president, Janice Staton, vice president, Jennifer Sloan, treasurer, Rachel Mackey, former president, enter new director of programs, Elena Oberg, who's not here and is our new director of sponsorships. She's been performing that role fabulously for us in the past. Mary Hillwig, director of sponsorships, scholarships. Mandy Thompson, director of mentoring. Jenny Hempstead, director of communications. And Pam Sutton, secretary. Yeah. I don't know if you go like talking. My apologies. So, thank you for your willingness to volunteer as board members for this 11th year of our chapter. As the Greater Ohio Valley Chapter Board of Women in Defense, you are responsible for the affairs of this organization and for providing its effective operations and management. You are the voice of the organization, and as such, you are responsible for providing leadership to those members and organizations aligned with the purpose and objectives of WID. Get ready. Do you pledge yourselves to faithfully discharge these responsibilities as board members of the Greater Ohio Valley Chapter of Women in Defense? If so, then please answer together. I will. All right, your first task as all those newly installed board members is a check. Okay. I, say your name, please. Pledge myself to fulfill. The board member responsibilities and obligations. Of the Greater Ohio Valley Chapter of Women in Defense. And to provide leadership and guidance. To the organization. In executing the duties of my office. Those of you who are WID chapter members, you've heard the pledge of your chapter officers and directors. Your support and assistance are vital if they are to fulfill their individual obligations. Therefore, I ask each of you to pledge your commitment to assist them in the execution of their duties in support of this organization. Ready for an answer here? Will you assist them as they undertake the activities of this organization? And will you encourage and advise them while refraining from unjust criticism of their efforts? If so, please answer, I will.
I will.
Thank you, chapter members. Greater Ohio Valley Chapter of Women in Defense board members, you are hereby installed into your respective offices. We wish you luck and will support you during your term. Members of the Greater Ohio Valley Chapter of WID, I present your 2023-2024 board members. Congratulations. And now a word from our new president, Joni Ehlers.
I'm deeply honored and excited to be the newly appointed president of Women in Defense. Together, we will continue to empower and support women in all facets of defense, education, and national security. There are plenty of opportunities for all of you to get ingrained into women in defense. So if you want to see a committee member, please see them today so that you can join one of our committees and help us along our path. I always want to thank Jim Mason-Brink and the WVI staff we're always having collaboration with women in defense and let's forge ahead, move forward, and let's just. When you came in today, you got a little red ticket, and that ticket is going to give you one of these envelopes. I think there's a gift card in here, so I think there are goals in there. Look at your ticket, 'cause all I have is numbers. The ending number is 1259. All right. Next one, 1266.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. 1273. All right. Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Mary Shampy, and I work for the business banking team at Bank of America. We have we're working today with a couple strategic partners, sbLiftOff, Taft Law, and SwindonSpringer to bring some expertise around the area of mergers and acquisitions of defense contractors, which is there are a lot of questions around that, and we want to make sure that you have answers, or at least know where to get. My distinct pleasure and honor is to first introduce Ms. Heidi H. Bullock. She'll be giving us opening remarks. Heidi H. Bullock, a member of the Senior Executive Service, is the Director of Contracting, Headquarters Air Force Materiel Command, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. She manages AFMC, contracting policy, processes, people, and technology. The 3,900 person AFMC contracting workforce executes 51 billion annually to procure emerging technologies, major weapon systems, supply chain items, installation support, and a wide range of contracting services. Again, it is my honor to welcome Ms. Bullock to kick off our meeting today. Thank you.
Well, this is certainly an exciting time to be in the government, in contracting. It's the end of the fiscal year. That's engagement with 30 September. And then there's some other stuff going on that may influence what we do, say the first week of October. Because I'm here today to talk to you all about our small business. Jeff Malott does a phenomenal job of leading the AFMC small business team, but really it is what the small businesses bring to the fight, to the airport, to the defense of our country. And I did bring some cheat sheet numbers so that I can so I don't screw that up. But obviously, small business, if you don't know, small business is just a huge engine driver. They participate, whether it's base operational support, which think about roofs, think about paving, think about mowing the grass, all types of services, janitorial, et cetera, et cetera. Also professional services. We couldn't, Heidi's personal opinion, I know this is being taken credit, so I might not want to say this, but in my opinion, we couldn't get by without our advisory and assistance support contractors that help the government employees defend our country, particularly in acquisition, in contracting as part of acquisition. So that's huge. But the really exciting stuff is, I would say, the cutting edge technology, the R&D, the research and development. Just think about artificial intelligence, just think about the flying cars, just think about all of these cool things that we're on the cusp of. And I was speaking to Jeff earlier, You know, he called it an industrial renaissance, if you will. And much of that is driven by small business. And I know the panel topic later on is going to be acquisition mergers, which is very interesting because I will just say sometimes we have a very successful small business and then a large business buys them, which is great for the small business, not so great from a government perspective, as we cannot, you know, count those numbers again in our small business growth and so forth. But so again, small business, super critical. Just want to give you some numbers about 23 and where we're projected to be for this year. And so we are projecting for Air Force Material Command a spend of over $9.2 billion. That's for the B. For the B. So that's a decent. I don't know, I personally take 9.2 billion myself, but that's me. So it's 9.2, and if you're thinking, well, how does that compare to what was available to spend? That's about 17.25%, 17.25% of the eligible spend, which is not bad. It's actually pretty good. And we continue to focus on that. And with and for you, those of you that are women-owned small businesses, you might be interested in this one. Of that 9.2 billion, 1.38 billion went to women-owned small businesses in 23, in FY23. It's pretty impressive. And we are exceeding what our goals. We're over our goals by about 2.5%, and that might not sound terribly exciting, but some of these goals, these socio-economic goals that we have, they're pretty robust and they're pretty challenging because not every place has women-owned, not every industry has women-owned businesses, etc., or other of the socio-economic programs. So, good, congratulations. Now you might be thinking, well, that's nice, but what does that mean to me? Well, there's 605. The data I gave you that comprised 605 women-owned small businesses, of which 110 are performing here in Ohio. So again, kudos to those companies who have been successful, and then kudos to the other companies that are trying to, as the help of the glider and other forums and so forth, figure out how to break in and how to be successful. I will say, hopefully you've heard about what is called the Small Business Innovative Research. It's called SWEET, and the government love acronyms. Maybe in industry you don't use acronyms. We can't survive without acronyms. So if somebody doesn't know what I'm saying, just say Small Business Innovative Research. And they're broken up into various phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And so last year, an AppWorks, it used to stand for something. Don't ask me what AppWorks stands for, but it used to stand for something. Now we just call it AppWorks. And the Air Force Research Lab have really transformed the Sitter program into this innovation engine. And it's just really taken off. And especially under Dr. Roper, our senior acquisition executive a few years ago, really focused the light on sitters and so forth. And so it's really, like I said, just transformed and really taken off. And women-owned small business has been successfully, have really been successful with the sitters. In 23, 154 phase 1 were awarded to women-owned businesses. And the real measure of success is the phase 3, because that tends to go into a program office. And there were, out of 188 phase 3s that were awarded, 22 of them went to women-owned small businesses to the tune of about $2.2 million. And we are doing our part with headquarters AFNC. We awarded a sitter contract to a women-owned small business to work some programming, software, database type stuff in the personnel arena. So we are also doing our part to get efforts and awards to women-owned small business. But again, I compliment you for taking the challenge and taking the plunge. It is not easy being a small business. I don't think anyone would tell you that it is easy, and so I commend you all for taking the leap and having the persistence and the dedication and the commitment, because as you know, that this is not an easy road to hoe, but we're doing it, or you're doing it, and I commend you for it. So I applaud you for that. That's pretty much what I wanted to do to see for opening comments. I'm willing to take questions, or we can roll right into the real reason we came here, lady, is acquisition and mergers. Thank you very much. We can get on the stage. All righty, that was easy.
Thank you so much. Hey, I guess I'd like to bring my panelists up to the stage. Thank you again, Ms. Bullock. We really appreciate that. And I think what resonates with me is taking that plunge. As business owners, it seems like a lot of risk. And our hope is that one day you're paid for all that. And so we wanted to cover a couple of important topics regarding mergers and acquisitions. Because in many cases, that is your succession plan. I'm going to start with the end first. Let's assume everybody makes quite a bit of money. At the end of the day, selling their company for what they intended. The part we're talking about technical parts today of that process. We also want to throw in, which we're not addressing, is what do you do with all that money? And I did bring a colleague from Merrill Lynch, Showroader. So if you're close to that point and you don't know what to do with the rewards that you've reaped from this lifelong endeavor, please see him. So a couple of the bullet points that we definitely want to cover today, and we do plan for this to be interactive, so please ask questions. Another point about this question, sometimes in this situation, if you're contemplating a sale or contemplating an acquisition, you don't necessarily want to know, want to stand up and say, hey, identify yourself. So we did put note cards and pens on the tables. If you do want to ask a question without identifying yourself, please just fill out a note card and perhaps take it to the end of your table or something, and we'll shuffle them up. And the two ladies in the back, Jasmine and Candy, will collect those and we'll get you in front of the right expert. So trends in government contracting, how to plan for your liquidity event, value drivers, impacting EBITDA multiples, the impact of set aside and prime versus sub work on transfer value, pressures affecting your cash at close, offers in deal structuring, maximizing after-tax cash in your pocket, and regulatory and legal issues. So our attempt is to address some of those issues and also to answer your questions. I'm going to briefly introduce our panel, or at least their area of expertise. Brandon Irvine is an M&A, that's Mergers and Acquisitions specialist for sbLiftOff. Joe Springer, CPA with SwindonSpringer. Joe is a local CPA. A lot of defense contractors work with Joe. Suzanne Sumner heads Taft Law's defense group. And Edward Spenceley is our expert at Bank of America. He's National Director for Government Contracting, GovCon companies. So Brandon, why don't you start and give us a little background, and we'll go down the line before we start.
Absolutely, thank you. That was a tall order, Mary just served up, so gonna do our best to cover all that without putting you to sleep. I promise we can talk more after. I don't want to torture you to death. So as Mary mentioned, my name is Brandon Irvine. I work for a firm called sbLiftOff. We are a national M&A advisory firm, and our focus is government contracting companies. So when I say M&A advisory, all that means is we help people buy and sell companies. So if you're looking to retire, take that liquidity event, you take your company to market, find a buyer, close it. Alternatively, if you want to buy a company, grow your company, or maybe you're an entrepreneur, you do that as well. And lastly, we do some valuations that are specific to that company. Mostly work in the designation market, which leads me to my first comment and myth bust. We hear this all the time in our kind of regional GovCon hubs, which is I'm a designation company, I'm a set aside woman-owned small business, SDVOSB, I can't sell my company. That's just not true. We do it all the time. You can sell your company. So if you take anything away from this panel, just know that even if you are a set aside organization, you can sell your company. Okay, so I want to talk about a few things today. I'm going to talk about the process, how the market will value your company from the buyer's perspective, and then a really fun one, how do I get paid? First, M&A is a team sport. It is a team sport, it is a team sport. You need experts that not only know M&A, but know GovCon. All the panelists up here are GovCon experts in their field, and that's really important. So from a process perspective, when you start thinking about selling your company or buying, you need to engage a few people. One is, as Mary mentioned, wealth manager. That wealth manager is going to help you understand, these are my current assets, this is the life I would like to live afterward, so these are the assets I need. And then can I sell my company and bridge that gap? Okay, so that's one. Another is someone like Joe. Joe and his team are going to help you maximize your tax exposure when you do take that liquidity event and sell your company. And then lastly, early on in this thought, I'm a little biased here, so forgive me, you want to talk to an M&A advisor. M&A advisors think of us as the quarterback, you know, and I apologize if you're a Cincinnati fan or a Browns fan, you know, maybe you're a Buckeyes fan, that makes you feel a little better about quarterbacks. But that's what that's what M&A advisors. You're the quarterback process, work with all the different parties involved to drive your deal to a close, whether it be on the buy side or the sell side. If you are on the buy side, you need to engage someone like Edward early on in the process, understand what your borrowing capability is, how much cash can you use, how would you fund the deal, can the combined organization pay that down? So that's early on. What am I thinking about? Now, the act of the deals themselves, 3 phases. Phase 1 is all prep. It's all prep, understand the company's strengths and weaknesses, and develop the marketing materials. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is actually going to market. It is reaching out to those centers of influence that know the people looking to buy and finding the right fit. We also call this phase the dating phase. You may not find your Prince Charming on the first date. We call it, you may have to kiss a few frogs before you find that engagement ring. I know I did, I found my wife eventually, but you know, we got there eventually. So that's the way to think about phase 2 is your first meeting with the first potential buyer may not be the one, and that's okay. You kind of have the least control over time in phase 2 when you're trying to find the right match, okay? And that engagement ring comes in the form of what we call an LOI, a letter of intent. And the letter of intent is essentially the commercial terms of the deal. How are you going to get paid? What's the structure? All those things. Once you sign that letter of intent, now you're engaged. And what does that mean? You can still back out of the deal, but you should be excited about closing the deal. And all parties involved, especially the team on stage here, are working on closing that deal. So it's non-binding, but it is very, very important to feel good about that letter of intent and that offer, again, whether you're buying or selling, to close that deal. So that's the phases, preparation, dating, and letter of intent to close, okay? Next, let's hit very high level on valuations. Let me tell you 2 things valuations are not. The value of your company is not the same as what your buddy on the golf course sold their company for. Just because they got a 6 or 7 multiple doesn't mean, oh, my company's better than theirs, I should get the same. No. That's not how it works. And I say that as a story because we hear stuff like that all the time. And it is also not the value that your wealth manager tells you you need. If your wealth manager says, hey, you need 10 million to live the type of lifestyle you want after close, that doesn't mean your company's worth that, right? The value of your company is going to be 100% specific to that company. In the government contracting world, things like the IDIQs, PPAs, the vehicles you're on matter in a big way. Your backlog, you have 3 years of backlog, that matters in a big way. What type of work are you doing? Do you have clearances? All these things matter and they're very specific to your organization, okay? There's a bunch of different valuation methodologies, we can talk in detail. I won't bore you to death. I understand that we've got beer pending in an hour, so let's get closer to that. And then lastly, and then I'll hand it over to Joe, is how do I get paid? Well, there's 4 ways in which sellers get paid. One, and the most exciting, is cash at close. Typically, we see 60 to 80% of the total purchase price being cash at close. The next way is seller financing. It's exactly what it sounds like. You as the seller say, I'm gonna finance $1 million of this deal for you to buy it. You get paid over the course of 3, 5, 7 years with a good interest rate, or whatever the terms are outlined in the LOI. Third is rollover equity. We may retain 10 to 15 to 20% of the company, work part-time, focus on BD, whatever you want to do, and then sell that later down the road and take what we call a second bite of the apple. And sometimes that 10 to 20% can be worth the same amount you sold the first 80% for. We've seen that. That strategic buyer comes in, grows the company, those shares become more valuable. And then lastly, has a negative reputation in the government contracting world, when structured very well, earnout can be a strong advantage to a seller. And I can talk more about that in detail later if you're interested, but I won't bore you. So that's my opening comments, and I'll pass it off to Jeff.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Joe Springer. I'm a partner with SwindonSpringer Co. We're a full-service accounting firm, high concentration in government contracting clients, so I can feel your pain. And they asked me to talk a little bit today about, as part of this process, there's certainly tax consequences. And for most people selling their business, it is the biggest tax consequence they'll ever be faced with. So it takes a lot of time and due diligence, get good professionals that guide you through. Basically, 2 types of sales transactions. One's a stock deal, one is an asset deal. Tax consequences are greatly different for both the buyer and the seller. In a stock deal, very simple. You have a certificate, you give it to him, he gives you cash. That's simple. He now owns everything in your company. Everything from the equipment to the receivables to the contracts. I think Suzanne's going to talk a little bit about how important that aspect is shortly. So in a stock deal, straightforward calculation. You get X dollars, you have a cost basis of something. It's capital gain treatment, so it's a preferable tax treatment for the seller. 20% federal plus state. Now, it's good for the seller, maybe not so much for the buyer, because the buyer does not get a step up in basis of the assets. Okay, so in an asset deal, I come in and I buy his receivables, his property and equipment, his contracts, his people. And there's an allocation of that purchase price that I'm going to pay in each of those categories. And when I sell my property and equipment, I have a gain between that allocated purchase price and my tax base. Those are all at ordinary tax rates, which right now is 37% plus state. Significantly different than capital gains. Okay. Now, a lot of companies, especially in this industry, might use the cash basis of accounting for tax purposes. Warning, if it's an asset deal and you're selling your receivables, the gain is the difference between the fair market value, face value of the receivables, and its tax basis, which is 0. All of that gain is at the higher ordinary tax rates. Now, it's not all bad for the buyer. They get a step up in basis for depreciation to the fair market value as of the date of the bill. So, kind of just basics. I guess my recommendation is at least be aware of the different types of transactions as you're working with your folks to structure a deal, and consider the tax impact of your decision.
Already learns. Involved in these.
Bill Edwards. Anyway, Suzanne Sumner, I am the co-chair of the government contracts practice at Taft Law. We're a full service law firm, so we have one, over 800 throughout all of our offices. So it's an amazing resource for me when clients call in and they need something that's not government contracts related. I can usually find something out. But what I do is government contracts 100% of the time. The way I get involved in mergers and acquisitions is anybody throughout our entire firm, whether we're representing a buyer or a seller, if there are government contracts involved, federal, state, local, they all freak out and go, oh my gosh, there's government contracts, they have different terms, what does this mean? We need you on it. And so I get involved in due diligence. That's mostly what I'm involved. But both of these gentlemen before me mentioned a couple different things I want to touch on. So letter of intent. So that's kind of right up towards the first part of phase 2, did you say?
It starts phase 3.
Okay, start at phase 3. Okay, letter of intent. That's a lot of times, and you probably have a lawyer involved before that. And a lot of times it's a corporate attorney, not necessarily a government contracts attorney, right? Because I'm not a corporate person. I would pull in a corporate person to help. And the letter of intent is very important because it's binding. And your attorney can help you negotiate the terms of that letter of intent. It's important from a government contracts perspective if you are a small business or any type of set aside small business. Because if you have just put in a proposal and within 180 days, I believe is what the regulation says, but then you've got a letter of intent out there that you've signed, that could impact your size status for that pending procurement. And you could win it and then somebody could protest and say, oh, you're not really small because you had a letter of intent that you signed. And I will tell you that we have argued that non-exclusive letters of intent shouldn't be held to that standard, if they are. And so you really have to be careful with the timing. If you are some type of a small business or set aside, if you get a letter of intent. So that's my point on that one. Joe mentioned stock sale versus asset sale. Also very important in the government contracts world. I do not see asset sales very often.
Yeah.
That's because if it is an asset sale, you have to novate the contracts, okay? And that's a process that's unique to the federal government. And it means the federal government has to approve that contract that you own, if you're the seller, going over to the new owner, right? They have to be involved in that process, even though the federal acquisition regulation, the FAR, you know what that is, even though the FAR has a sample novation agreement in there, it should be pretty simple and easy, and there's just supposed to be several attachments. I love government attorneys. I used to be one, so please don't ever take this wrong. It depends on the government attorney that you get who's looking at that novation agreement, because I only once have I ever had the government attorney say, yep, the template from the FAR is good. You gave us everything. We're gonna go ahead and novate all these contracts. A lot of times they want things that are different from that. Yes, sir.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yes.
What if you do an asset sale, but you keep the company as a subsidiary
Still have to novate the contracts.
in all cases?
Yes. I have never, ever had the government say they're not going to require you to novate. I had companies just want to change the name and move them to like a holding company or something. And they said, no, that's into an asset sale and require novation. It's a great question though. And just also so that there isn't a misunderstanding. In a stock sale, you generally do not need government approval for the contracts with the owner. That doesn't mean they can't require it.
There's generally terms in which you have to disclose, that you have to tell the contracting officer, hey, we sold the company, this is the new owner, but it's not necessarily.
Right, and I have never seen the government official get involved and say, oh, wait a minute, we want you to novate that, or we want to be involved in that. Because generally the sale's already occurred on a stock sale. You've got your 30 days to update your SAM.gov registration if you change your sign status. So that's the whole stock sale versus asset sale. I don't see that happening very often where it's an asset sale, it's usually a stock sale. And then the other point that I touched on where your attorneys get involved is the due diligence. And that's where we're looking at, so when I get pulled in on due diligence, when our client is buying a government contractor, we want to know this company that they're buying, have they been compliant with all those FAR provisions in their government contracts? Have they been doing their proper reporting? Do they have all their EEO stuff up to date? Have they ever had a government investigation? Have they ever been proposed for suspension? Do they have bad CFARs?
we're digging deep and we want to know all that stuff because of course the company that's buying you wants to know, am I really buying a good company that has been, that has good true past performance. And then the final thing that's important in due diligence, and you both of you touched on it, is size. And if you've got a minority status or any type of a set aside status, yeah, what's the pipeline? How, if you've got a big IDIQ and you've already performed 4 years of it, okay, that's not quite as lucrative, of course, to the buyer. And that I get lots of questions about, well, if we get bought and we're no longer small, can we still perform? Generally, yes. It's just the government cannot count future orders under that IDIQ in their small business bucket. As well as mentioned with that. That's really important to the federal government. But again, depending on the industry you're in, they might not need you to be considered, small for the procurement. They might already be close to meeting their percentages for the year, and it's not that big of a deal. It may not be, and it's a lot of work for them to go and re-procure. Right? If they say, oh, we're not going to work with you anymore because you're not small, they got to go and re-procure that to get somebody else to perform the work. We maybe only have 1 or 2 years left. So I haven't seen that happen a whole lot either. That was a whole lot too. I think I touched on the big legal things.
All right. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Okay,
Still awake?
still awake? Surprised we got slides. No. All right. Evan Spenceley, I am the National Government Contracting Executive for Bank of America, which simply means I have about 4,800 small businesses that I oversee, working in every government agency, every capability, every type of work you can think about. I like to say we have people that sell toilet paper in the Army and put stuff on the marginal and everything in between. We have great clients that are up here supporting your efforts, SOCOM, CENTCOM, DIA, CIA, NSA, CDC, you name it, we got it. We even have a client that does OCC work, who I don't talk to often because, yeah, that's my audit, right? Here's what I'm gonna come back with. I've been with the bank 23 years. Came out as SOCOM, CENTCOM, Army platoon sergeant. Grew up in the Army. Yeah, Air Force. All right. Okay. Love the Air Force. That's where I found my wife. What's the right ones? But really, what I want to talk about is, as a good platoon sergeant will be, is have a plan, right? Have a plan and backward plan, right? Everything you heard about here is a lot of information. My favorite comment so far is simple and easy. I've never seen anything before that is simple and easy. It's supposed to be, but it's but again, it's understanding that when you get to this point, this is where you depend on, and Brenda had a great point. What I call them inside employees, outside employees. Your inside employees are building your business, right? Your contract person, your proposal writer, your DDOs, your capture people, your CFO, your CEO, pick a C, any C. Your outside employees is a group of people like this, right? Is your M&A guy, your M&A gal, your attorney, your CPA, your banker. Focus on the industry. The closer you get to exiting, the more you depend on your outside employees than your inside employees. Your inside employees have created the opportunity for you to sell, right? Your outside employees are going to help you get through that transaction. Brendan said it, early and often, right? Have that conversation. The biggest bang for your buck, right? That's what people are talking about. I always tell people, what's your exit strategy? They would like to start their company. I'm not going to sell it. And let's think about this. If I create in my mind a plan that I would sell my company in 5 years, and this is what it should look like for X amount of dollars, that means in 4 years I need to be here, right? Backwards one. In 3 years I need to be here. 2 years I need to be here. 1 year. It changes what you do tomorrow. Even if you don't sell in 5 years, what have you created? You created a very strong small business with great enterprise value, right? In our things, at the bank, I have small business government contractors, so we bank about 82% of large primes, right? Raytheon, Kathy, Lockheed, L3, pick a large prime. We do most of their banking. All their small business liaisons are calling me, saying, Edward, we have a small business set aside in plan. Can you find me a purple uniform? I need a woman, I mean, I literally had this the other day, I'm looking for a woman on Hub Zone 8A, minority. Like, anything else? Let's like 4 aces, you want a wild card with that, you got money. So, but again, that's where they're relying on the outside employees, right? Think about the network that we have. 4,800 small businesses, I'm like, here's 3 of them. You know, you can go meet them. Right? That's what we're trying to do is connect here with that. And what does that do? That builds the bottom line, enterprise value in each of those companies, right? And again, think about it. A lot of people always talking about their revenue. And when I got $100 million, you know, 100 FTE possibility on my pipeline. And I go, that's great. The incumbent's my client. I know what the return on that contract is. It's not worth managing 100 people. I'm going to tell you that right now. Here's one for 20 people that the return is 6 times that. I'd much rather manage 20 people and make 18, 16% on a contract than manage 100 and make 4%. I don't know about the rest of you, right? So it's not so much the top line revenue. You look at the bottom line, right? You look at enterprise value. You know, EBITDA is your bottom line, right? It's not the top line. Hey, we went from 50 to 100 million, but we went from $1 million in earnings to 500,000. That's sort of going the wrong way, right? Let's sustain the bottom line there. And then we talk about the same things. I call it what makes you bankable makes you viable, right? And the things that I looked at, so I wrote all the credit policies for government contracting with the bank. So I'm like the guy who wrote the FAR at the bank, so I think I understand it, right? When somebody advocates from a credit perspective. You know, we look at your backlog. We look at the sustainability of growth. Those are the same things that the buyers look at, right? Is there longer than 3 years on this? And that's what is going to determine some of the structure. You know, are we going to hold back some of the payment up front and do earnouts? And you're going to stick around for 2 years and work really hard to make sure we compete and win what's, you know, ending in 2 years, 3 years, that type of thing. Audited financials. That cost a little bit more money, right? But quite frankly, if you're backwards planning, if I'm going to sell in 5 years, my 5th year, 4th year, 3rd year, I should probably have an office. Right? Probably good to do that. Again, I already talked about the balance sheet. CMMC, everybody's favorite subject, right? All right.
Don't throw any tomatoes at it, please.
Yeah, but it's reality, right? I get asked this all the time, why is a banker asking me about CMMC? I lend you money to perform contracts for these fine gentlemen over here. And if you get taken off the contract because you don't meet a CMMC requirement, I don't get paid back. That's pretty simple for a banker, right? Bankers, a lot like contracting shops, are mitigating risk. That's what we did. We mitigate risk to meet a mission set, right? To meet a mission requirement. DCAA, of course, accounting system, all that good stuff. You know, people talk about CPARs all the time. CPARs are important. You can have great CPARs and still have, I won't say horrible, not great culture in a company. So don't just look at CPARs, right? What's on paper is not exactly what you're buying. Right? You may buy and find out that, wow, it is no fun going to work with this group of people, right? Life is way too short, right? Don't match up capabilities. I'm going to use an analogy that my wife probably hates, right? Susan probably has capabilities to be a mother and a wife, and I have capabilities to be a father and a husband, but culturally we don't get along, that marriage is not going to last, right? So what are you looking for when you're buying something? Are you just looking for capabilities? I have much more successful clients that look outside of their capabilities and look at additional capabilities because the culture fit is right. And then they actually expand those sets of capabilities, right? So you widen your pool. Same thing with, you know, woman-owned SDB, bring them together. I got 2 pools to hunt in now, right? We know about the numbers from women, you know, and I'm sure if you guys want to break down on minorities, 8As, SBLiftOffs, right? All of those numbers, you know, who are the teammates? Who do these people work with? Do I get access to their Rolodex of teammates? Are their teammates gonna be affected by this and this acquisition? Are the vendors gonna be affected? Does the down trail of subcontractors, do they meet CMMC requirements? Like those, really good question, because you don't want to pay a premium for something to find out there's no cybersecurity rules. Right, there's no, whatever it was. Manage the pipeline, right? Manage the backlog. Again, great conversation here about, you know, when I buy this stock versus asset, or when I buy this, and what does that backlog mix look like, or what is the timing of it? Right? If I'm gonna buy something and 50% of that backlog, the period of performance ends in 24 months or less, I'm gonna be like, this is great. I'm gonna give you 30% of your money today. I'll give you another 30% when we recompete and win the next 3 or 4 years. And then I'll give you the, banker, right, 30, 30, 40. I'll give you
I'll do the math.
40, I'll give you the 40% at this rate. If we sustain the same win rate, right, 46. And to your point, Brendan, I think I'll even be willing to give you 10, 20% bump. If there's extra work added to that recompete, or there's an additional contract that you bring in, that's second bite of the apple, right? Talk about cash basis versus accrual basis. We are bankers, we love accrual basis financials. Right, cash basis, your taxes. And cash basis. I mean, even if you're using the simplest accounting EIB, right? You can hit a button usually that changes it from cash basis to accrual. Right? That gives us a wider scope of your business model. When cash is in and out, you know, accrual is invoice and receipt, right? Or expectation of reception, right? AR. And yes, it can be simple and easy. When you actually have, you know, you've built a great team of inside employees, focus on the outside employees. I see audited financials all the time, looking, I go, CPA firm, we cheat them and how? Never heard of them. I Google them. They don't even have a government group. And you do government contracting. They don't understand DCAA, they don't understand FAR. Why are they doing your CPA work? And the last thing I'll say about your outside partners, if they're not willing and able to refer you to teammates, identify and capture teaming opportunities, you're probably talking to the wrong people. Because when Joe gets something from somebody, he should be able to go, oh, you know what? Andrew needs to meet this person. These two should be working together and bidding on this contract over here with these folks. Right? Because I know what my clients' needs are. Right? I work directly with SOCOM, DIA, several other agencies. I've actually written financial feasibility for some of their contract requirements, right? So knowing what the needs are of my client or of my client's client makes it easier for me to go to my clients and say, you need to be working with him. Come together, you have all the past performance you need, right? I love putting together teams of smalls. Are there any large businesses in here? Put your hand back up. I love putting together teams of smalls to compete on full and open against giants. Right? Because we can convince the government, especially when you have small business leaders like this, you can say, my small team can do this. Right? Let's set aside this for my smalls. They can do this, right? Because first of all, they're closer to the work, they're smaller, they're more agile, like one of the government's favorite words, agile. Right? A lot of small businesses favorite words too. We can be agile too because we're small. Right? I'm gonna stop there because I'm sure we're gonna have questions, comments.
Yeah, thanks, Edward, and thanks everybody for your comments, and we stopped right at the time that I was signing up for the question. So I do have some questions prepared, but this is really your opportunity to ask anything you want from the panel members. Do I have anybody that has a question that would like to begin?
Looks like Andy has one. That's coming up, I think.
Yeah.
I have comments.
Yeah, sure.
So he mentioned CMSC, which of course is a bad word.
It's like four bad words.
Yeah, it's all the cybersecurity changes, flux, and that sort of thing, but that is a really important deal for lawyers. That's a really important part for the lawyers too, on any deal, and so that is something that they do a deep dive into during due diligence to try to make sure company is compliant or supposed to be compliant or whatnot. And part of your purchase agreement includes representations and certifications, and they really put in robust certs to protect the buyer if the company, the selling company doesn't have all of that in place. That could be enough for a company to walk away, or it could be enough for them to say, if anything goes wrong with all of this, even after we bought you, it's still coming back on you. You gotta pay to take care of it. So that is a very important part of.
And just add on to that very quickly, right? Just let's think about this. Is it easier for me, let's just say over a 2 or 3 year timeline? Is it easier for me as a business owner to double my EBITDA or change my multiplier by 3 or 4? Probably a lot easier just to change that multiplier, right? What is the stuff that's going to change the multiplier? All the little things that we're talking about that you have in, you know, I want 5 times. Why? Because I'm CMMI 3, right? Or I am DTA compliant, my CPARs are all excellent, right? Boom, 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 all over the checklist, right? You're gonna pay a little premium for me, right? All my largest contracts still have 4-year option years. Right, all those little things that we're talking about, right? You're gonna help change the multiplier, which are a lot easier than going out and changing how much more business we actually got, right, in the next year. Questions? Stop the lawyer.
Valuation, how did that work in a bidding competition to sell?
Okay, I'll repeat it. How does valuation work in a bidding competition? So.
Take this one.
Say that's something.
All right. So, this, this is generally kind of sbLiftOff's approach to what we call bidding. Anytime we take your company to market, our goal is to get a win-win deal. And what do I mean for that? It's good for you as the seller, and it's good for the buyer. Because at the end of the day, a buyer is not going to invest the money, the capital, the time, the effort to acquire your company if it doesn't pay off. So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to have empathy for the other side and considering that. Now, having said that, we will always try to solicit more than one LOI. We want 3, 4, 5 LOIs to really triangulate what the market is valuing the company at. And we take a pretty candid approach with buyers on our side. We manage the buyer pool effectively and say things like, hey, look, we have a better offer, it's a good strategic fit, is there something else you want to do? And we'll manage the buyer pool from a stance of empathy and collaboration rather than a stance of you need to bid higher, right? You don't want to burn that relationship early on with your buyer because you need to maintain a good, healthy relationship, close that deal, and more importantly, integrate that company into the new company for your people and your customers. So that's kind of the stance we take on.
Yeah, and I would just say the depth and breadth of the buyer pool, right, is really important too, right? There's a difference between me wanting to buy a company that's a bolt-on or an expansion of what I may already do. It's the same with maybe going, they got NSA work, I want NSA work no matter what, I'm paying a premium to get their NSA work, right? So it's really thinking about who the buyer pool is and how they're engaged, and that's what the people like sbLiftOff are great for. And working in conjunction.
And your comments about paying a premium, that gets to something we call willingness to pay. And every buyer is going to have a different level of willingness to pay. And at the end of the day, your company is worth what somebody's willing to pay. And as you negotiate and say, look, we have a better offer, this is structure we're looking for, you will find the willingness to pay and people will drop out. And that's okay, as long as it's approached in a good way. Good question, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question from somebody on the,
Yeah, go ahead.
on our virtual meeting. So Eric, I'll take yours right after this.
Sounds good.
One of our virtual participants has asked, are you seeing the recent increases in borrowing costs affect GovCon M&A activity?
Should I get some again? I would.
You go ahead, I'll comment.
Yeah, so the answer is yes. In the lower middle market, so in this kind of designation space, we still see a lot of companies that want to go to market, and B, we still see a strong buyer. The major difference that we're seeing on the advisory side, and I'd love to validate this with you, Edward, is banks are tightening up in terms of the cash they're willing to lend at close. So we're generally seeing, the structure be, we'll lend 3 times EBITDA cash at close instead of 3.5 and 4. So banks are still kind of, quite honestly, chomping at the bit to lend. We're seeing a lot of banks come to us and ask us what deals we have. So I think the market is very healthy still and very active, but there are certain, nuances changing like that from our perspective.
Yeah, and think about the cost of funding, right? The cost of funding has gone from the bits, right? And you get the same thing on your deposits, right? Not that, right? It's not dollars to dollars. But think about that, from a risk management perspective of a bank, right? Typically, I would say traditional bank is very comfortable at 3 times EBITDA or less from a leverage perspective. Well, quite frankly, interest rates going from 2.5 to 6 and 7 can put you over that, right? From a principal and interest payments perspective, right? So again, I think, remember, proactive, make a plan. Your plan should be, I have several dozen clients that I meet with the CPA attorney and the advisor all the time without the client present. Because we know the plan, right? So we're the ones adjusting to the economic environment and what's going on outside of their control. To come back as advisors and say, you know what, we're probably gonna have to structure this at 60% cash, 30% holdback, 10% earn out, right? So we're setting the expectation, the reality of what your transaction may end up looking like.
And as we pull those different levers to structure that deal, as we use those 4 different ways we get paid, we call it structuring, you should expect that your multiple will go up. The higher the structuring, the higher the valuation should be. And again, that's negotiated. Think about it as selling a house. You sold your house for 100% cash, you would sell it at a discount because you're getting 100% cash. So yeah, that is.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. So especially as it relates to lower middle market, how prevalent are private equity deals, whether those are GovCon specific sponsors or more general?
Yeah, great question. We are seeing more and more private equity come into the government contracting space. We think it's because of the stability. Uncle Sam is kind of one of the best companies in the world, always willing to pay. And private equity can get really weird in the designation market because of things, and I kick this to you, affiliation groups. If you buy a small business, that small business becomes affiliated with any other company that they own. And I've now exhausted the depth of my knowledge there. So
So I completely agree, seeing a lot more private equity purchasing government contractor, and yes, they want to know if they're small business and will they lose that status, and we're always trying to do an affiliation to determine which companies will they be affiliated with, because there's a private equity firm, right, and they might own all these other companies. And depending on how that ownership is set up when they buy your company, then you might have to aggregate all of those companies together. And now you've got super high revenue or even really high employee count, depending on what your NAICS code is, what your size is based on. But then there's ways to structure it a little differently too. So they might own all these companies, but they don't share people on the board of directors, or they don't have a high enough percentage ownership that they have to aggregate them to count them as affiliates. So that's one way it's looked at. It's easier for private equity by manufacturers because that's usually based on employee headcount. And even though they own all these other companies, they might not necessarily have a really high headcount. It might be smaller companies with smaller headcount, so they still remain small even though they're all.
I mean, you talked about 1250 headcount?
Yeah.
Or 1500.
1,500.
1,500 is the largest, the largest amount of associates you have. And still be considered small by the government. We've got clients that are doing 800 million, 900 million dollars that are small businesses. Because they have 1,248 employees.
Under things like SBUSB or Women in Small Business,
Right.
if PE takes 49% stake, and the designation is still 51% owner, then that works as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And we actually have clients that, you know, structure their ESOPs that way as well. I'm a service disabled veteran, I'm gonna do 51%, I'm gonna do 49% as ESOP. Right? And then they take the second bite of the apple when they go to 100% ESOP a couple of years down the road.
I have a question way over here and then I'll come back.
Yeah, with Brandon, if you're representing a seller and you're trying to create that competition space, where are you advertising? Is by sell or is the GovCon got a different marketplace?
So biz buy sell is kind of like low market, right? It's companies doing $1 million in revenue, $500,000. So we don't necessarily go that low. Our approach is basically a couple different ways. One is we have a pretty extensive network of folks like up here on the panel, centers of influence, bankers, lawyers, accountants, wealth managers. That's generally the first place we go when we're taking a company to market. Hey, here's the teaser. We have this, I don't know, call it a construction company. They're doing 60 million in revenue, 4 million in EBITDA. They've got 100 million in backlog. Are any of your clients potentially interested? And we will turn up a lot of interest that way. And we know that we have a good relationship with that COI and they want to take care of their clients to add value. So we get a lot of interest through our partners. The next is when we take a company to market. I have the unfortunate burden of doing a research project where I find all of the different strategic companies, whether it be GovCon or commercial, that might be interested in acquiring that type of company. And depending on what the type of company is, generally turn up 400 to 600 companies. And then we start marketing directly to them. Direct outreach to their business development folks, their VPs, their C-suite. And we generally get a lot of interest that way as well. So we'd like to explore those two different avenues. And also worth mentioning, a lot of clients come to us and say, hey, I've got 3 people chasing me. And that's always nice too, because maybe one of those works out. So those are generally the 3 ways we go about it. We don't necessarily broker on anything that is buy sell.
Thank you.
Back to the.
Yeah, you had a question. Yeah.
Back to his question, Paul, on the, so if a private equity company wants to buy your small companies and they don't have any GovCons and you're a GovCon, so there's no affiliates, when you would still be small business or that doesn't matter?
Still be affiliated, the affiliation, the way that comes into play is common ownership. So it doesn't matter what type of business their various companies are that they own. If they've got a common ownership and the ability to control and manage and those sorts of things, then they're considered affiliates, and they all get aggregated. So,
Now, if they use capital from a separate fund, an LP, that's a way around it as well.
yeah, there are ways around it.
It gets very nerdy, but there are ways around it.
Because if they use a separate funds, it's a separate living entity, I guess, probably not the right way to say that, but it's a separate entity. But it doesn't have, under the umbrella, it doesn't have affiliated ownerships.
Yeah.
And
We
we've
want
always,
to stay under 500 for SBIR purposes.
Right.
Not a thing, so.
Right, and there are smaller PE firms too, right? I mean, that it's easier for them to, I mean, I was just involved in it, you know, actually. And I said, well, the size standard is 500 for this one, for that exact reason, they're doing simmers and stuff. And they said, that's not gonna be a problem, even with all the affiliates of this PE firm, because it's a smaller one, they've got like 100 employees total of all the affiliated companies that will be added. So,
I would say not only we see more PE fund activity, we're seeing more PE funds. Right? We're seeing family funds. We're seeing, you know, I got all this oil money and I'm bored. I'm gonna go buy me a government. Right? What else we see this? Right? We see what happens. Uh-oh.
Yeah, yeah, no, my question is, in this process, especially talking about private equity, is who composes that, right? Because obviously we have interest in what was called foreign ownership control and or interest, right? So I'm just curious, we're internally taking on that due diligence process, especially in particular regards to SBIR, but that's going to come on even at a greater scale. And so I was just curious on your side, right? I know what we're thinking on our side, but are you looking at that when you see a private equity deal?
Absolutely, absolutely, especially if the firm that's the company whose contracts are being acquired has a facility clearance, or any of their folks have their own personal clearances to do the work or whatever. And that is a process, especially with the larger PE firms, and they might have people that are owners in that are from all these random countries, and you got to look at the percentages, and then you have to fill out, I can't think of what form number it is, it's a government form for just the facility clearance, right? And the amount of information you have to pull together and figure out all these people and what countries their nationalities are, and what percentage they own, and yeah, there is a process, and that is part of the due diligence process that the lawyers are.
Yeah, from a bank perspective, the person that we asked, the firm is getting involved, not even merger and acquisition overall, but let's say our client is being involved. That's some percentage of each firm. Is the first thing we ask within the bank is this a covered firm? Do we know them, right? Are we banking the firm, right? Because then a lot of our due diligence is already done. What is the ownership structure? But affiliation is not just dollars. And FTE affiliation is exactly what we've been talking about. It's ownership, security clearances, doesn't affect ITAR, and there's all sorts of possibilities.
Part of due diligence.
Right.
We have attorneys that are looking at all the items.
ITAR, right? So we are.
We have to do a CIPS, file, right? I mean, all of those things come to play. The lawyers are all over that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have to ask an obvious question. How expensive is this? Like, it's like, seriously, like, how do you negotiate, or how do you talk to 5 people and do all this due diligence and still walk away with proceeds?
I'll touch on this.
I'll let you handle that.
Not everybody jump at once.
The attorney said I could say. No. You want to be smart about your debt structures, right? So think about this. A lot of this is built into, from both sides, right? Buyer and seller. Is it worth it for me to pay X for a company, X to the attorney, X to the M&A, X to the banker? You guys don't get paid, right? So really, you have to look at that as an overall picture, right? Backing, what are the rates and fees for this? I mean, it's just like doing a loan, it's looking at what is the interest rate if I hold this money for this long, what's it going to cost, right? That sounds like simple math, right? But it's bigger numbers typically. I mean, think about it. We're probably the most regulated person in the room. I'll be brave and say that. The bank is probably the most regulated person in the room. We have to disclose upfront every penny that you're paying us and what it's going to do, right? Similarly, I think an attorney's going to say, here's my rate, here's my, CPA is going to say the same thing.
I guess I'd add to that, cheapest is not always the best. It's a one-time transaction in your life.
How many people here love LPTA? Lowest price definitely acceptable. Yeah, not one person in the room, right? Neither do we, right? I am not going to be LPTA, I'm going to be best value. Right? I'm going to be best and most reasonable value.
So I'll add some comments here. The term we use and your M&A advisor to be able to show you this is what's called a net proceeds law. If I sell my company for $10 million, I've got 3 million in cash. All transactions are cash free, debt free, so I get to sweep cash. Most of it nuances to that. I've got to pay my lawyers, I've got to pay the accountants. The M&A advisor gets paid upon success, and I'm going to pay this amount of taxes. So therefore, you back all that out, and your net proceeds is what you should walk away with. So when you're engaging an M&A advisor, that's what you want to bring up is, okay, how do we think about net proceeds from the sale of this company? So that's the sell side. And just to add some context, most M&A advisors work on a success fee, or they should, which means most of their comp is contingent upon the successful close of your deal. If there are any major fees up front, it's a bit of a red flag, dig into that. There are some monthly fees, again, a lot of that should be credited against the success fee. So that's kind of on the sell side thoughts. On the buy side, if you're looking to buy a company, a bit of a harder process, right? There's about 5 to 10 buyers per every one seller, which means it's competitive, and it's a longer process. A sell side engagement takes generally 6 to 9 to 12 months. A buy side engagement can take longer. Even if you're serious, you have cash, you have plenty of capacity, it's harder. So for fees to be aware of, your quarterback, M&A advisor during that closing phase should be able to work with your lawyers to manage things appropriately. We always joke that if a lawyer ever says, "I'll write up a report on it," no, we don't need a 40-page report, and we'll work on it, right? So those are things to think about. The hourly rate of all the different partners, and they can be expensive, but it's part of the process.
I think important is net proceeds. Remember what I was talking about before, we look at the bottom line. At a bank, you should look at the bottom line as a seller, right? And then do what we call, bottom up math. I should be bottom up math. If I'm walking away with this, and my sale price is this, what's all the minus stuff in between? And why is it what it is, right? And is it negotiable? I mean, things are negotiable, right? I don't know, I negotiate with my kids every day. I don't know about you guys, right? I negotiate with my wife price tag.
My daughter is 15 months old, and I have yet to bring one negotiation.
I have one other question. Because you have government contracts presently and in the future, if you require, how are the costs, since you just brought up their costs, how are these absorbed by your company or by your clients? Can you pass any of this along? Okay, Joe.
Yeah, the cost of the acquisition is not deducted. Organization cost, there might be some that think it's great, clear, government's not gonna pay for it.
Okay, so this becomes an expense outside of what your bread and butter is, okay.
But I think there's also that future expense reduction, right? Right, if I'm buying Joe's company, I don't need to. I don't need to, right, I don't need 3 of these, 6 of those, 12 of those, right? So unfortunately, it comes at the cost of company personnel most of the time.
The phrase we use to get what Edward is saying is an acquisition, again, should be 1 + 1 = 3. And if that's true, then the debt that the acquiring entity takes on, the combined cash flow from both of those companies should have no problem servicing the debt. That's going to be Edward's, top in mind.
Absolutely. That's right, cash flow lendings. I want to know that you generate enough cash flow to pay me back. That's what we're in business for. I've never been a not-for-profit bank. Or PE firm, or,
No, sir.
right?
Right. Do we have any other questions? I actually could keep going, but it is almost time to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for your attention and involvement and engagement in the subject. It's clearly something we encourage you to think about and plan for. I think what I hear is to have solid relationships with these providers. I think most of us have long-term relationships with our clients. whether it's your CPA, your attorney, your banker, and your consultants. I would be happy to meet you across the parking lot at the Dayton Beer Company afterwards for a beer, or just casually here. I don't have anything further, and again, thank you so much to my colleagues and my support team from Bank of America. I am really grateful for the opportunity. I think one of the things that I always say, well, I stole it from Professor Deming out of the manufacturing world, but it's not enough to do the best you can. You have to know what to do and then do the best. And so educate yourself on all of these aspects of your business life, and you'll walk away with more money. That you're So anyway, I look forward to coming afterwards. Thank you.
Maybe I need to confirm. But I would. I've been a linebacker.
Yeah, I just.